I was very envious of Claude having his iPad with him. I've got my 1979 iPad with me. It's very good, even comes along with a stylus and everything. The reason I'm using this is, one, because it gives me confidence, but secondly, also, the first part of my talk, I'm going to talk about some philosophy. And as I'm not a natural philosopher, one of the things I've found is if I quote philosophers and I get them wrong, especially if they're still alive, there's a very strong chance they will name a paradigm after me, which is a highly negative one. So I'm going to be very careful, and I have to read a few things out. So forgive me for that, but it'll help us as we go along. The other thing I have to say is, as Joanna just said, as scientists, the reality is most of the time we're doing things as best we can. But I have to say, after 20 years of working in the conservation of whales and dolphins, we've most probably been getting it wrong. So that's my first challenge to myself. The second is that the title of the talk is Rights for Whales and Dolphins, Necessity or Exaggeration. Well, I actually think now, after 20 years, it's a necessity. You can decide whether it's an exaggeration. I'm going to try and cram about 5 hours of talk into the remaining 16 minutes or so, and you can judge at the end of it. The challenge, I said, was that I've spent 20 years talking to fishermen, to governments, trying to reduce bycatch by 2%, trying to end whaling or get whaling down by 50%. And we've talked about whale stocks, big populations of these creatures out there. And the thing I've realized is actually we're most probably talking at absolutely the wrong level. And the more we learn about these creatures, the more we realize that we have to talk about them as individuals. And I'll try and explain a few of those things as we go through. So first of all, I ought to say whales and dolphins, what are they? Well, they're mammals. They're like us. They have live young. They feed them milk. They're warm-blooded. I say that, but some people don't know that. Some people still think of them as fish, and I'll explain a little bit further in a moment. The history of our relationship with whales and dolphins also goes back a long way. If we go back to the Romans, there's a poet, the Opian of Sicilia, who talks about the gods looking down on the killing of dolphins like the same as the killing of humans. Aristotle in the Greeks talked about dolphins saving other dolphins. Even in the Arctic nations, say the Inuit in Greenland, they venerated Sedna as their goddess, and it was her fingers which fell into the water that became the whales and dolphins that then fed her. Even in China, Baiji, now a dolphin which is what's called, well, it's almost extinct. There are a few of them left, but basically we'd say it's functionally extinct. There aren't enough of them. The Baiji was a princess who was going to be married off to somebody she didn't want to, and she jumped in the river. A dolphin that's been venerated, but as human beings, unfortunately, we built things like the Three Gorges Dam, we've polluted the water, and now we don't have many of them left. So when I'm talking about this new way of thinking about conservation, I want to introduce the concept of personhood. Now, there's a long history of personhood in sort of moral philosophy, but this is where I have to quote someone. And there's a Professor Thomas White out of California who's a friend and a colleague, and therefore I really do have to get what he says right, else I'll never get invited round for dinner. And he said, a person is a who and not a want. If I got that right? A who and not a what, sorry. Actually, his words were, a person is any being, no matter what their species, who has traits that imply a high level of intellectual and emotional sophistication. I note it's a Saturday after a Friday at a university, and if you look around, is there intellectual and emotional sophistication? I would hope so, in the group of students coming from Loughborough University. But he sets a really high standard. He talks about creatures needing self-awareness, an ability to express both positive and negative emotions, displaying self-consciousness and personality. He says they have to show abstract thought and solve complex problems. Well, he's setting the bar really high for us guys that want to show that other creatures apart from humans fulfill that. Tom's been studying dolphins as well as human beings, and he comes from a department that looks at the ethics in business, actually. And he says he has found that in dolphins, and I agree with him. In trying to talk about what is personhood, we have to distinguish the language. And one of the things we have to think about is the word between human and person. I haven't got many slides, but hopefully they're nice ones and you enjoy them. And two of the questions we have to ask are all humans persons? And are all persons humans? The first one is a medical ethical question. And you might just say, yeah, of course every human's a person. Well, is a fetus a person? That has a context of both religious, medical, and your personal views that come to play in relationship to that one. The second one is about animal ethics. And the use of the word person, I like it because it also desensitizes the debate from being one of using language that takes away a species bias. Because if I say I'm human and you're an animal, I'd like Joanna when she said, as a primate, as an ape that was studying, it puts us in the mix, a graduation, as Darwin would have said, between the basic and the very advanced, whatever advanced actually means. So we try to remove the species bias by talking about persons. Language is also limiting. In Japan, the word for whale is kujira. And the kanji, there's two parts of the kanji character for kujira, whale. It means big fish. So you imagine if you're growing up in Japan and you're learning about whales and dolphins, you learn about 20 characters as you're going through your academic student up to before university. You learn about 20 characters for animals, and the one for whale is big fish. So you can imagine the contextual difficulty of trying to then debate an issue about why this group of people, as we might call them, or non-human persons, should be defended. But why does personhood matter? Well, because personhood creates a state of moral standing. Moral standing means there's a sense of the individual, and the individual creates an entitlement. You'll notice I haven't really used the word rights yet, but I think that the moral standing that creates the entitlement then leads to rights. And I'm not talking about whales and dolphins having human rights. I'm talking about them having cetacean rights, and these can be subtly different, both similar and different. We can also examine person versus non-person. So for example, if I was to say it's about your ability to suffer, if I mocked the people in the front row here, I can't quite see you, so if I say anything nasty, please forgive me. If I made horrible comments about them, I'm sure that I could cause them to suffer a little bit. All right, embarrassment at the very least. Personal hurt if I really went to town. If I was to mock, say, my pet goose at home, in the same way, I'm not quite sure she would really take it, unless I was being aggressive towards her. If I was to mock Loughborough University, well, actually, Loughborough University is a legal person. So I have an inanimate object here in Loughborough University, which is protected. We have the lovely front audience here, who also, I hope, are protected. And yet my goose, as another non-human, isn't protected. So there's a scale in the way that we can think about persons and non-persons. Personhood also, as I said, creates moral standing, and therefore we have a recognition of needs. In human terms, we would say we all have basic human needs, which we have to recognize and honor each other. When we come to cetaceans, we say those needs most probably are to do with access to food, access to freedom, i.e. maybe we shouldn't imprison them in captivity for captive display. But also we increasingly recognize there is a thing about social cohesion. These creatures are social animals. This image is a beautiful image, and this dolphin can't communicate with you through facial features like you would. It can only communicate in other ways. If we took a step further back with this photo, it'll actually be through the frame of a concrete tank. So what appears to be I was about to say animal, I was slipping into my own rhetoric there, but this non-human person looks pretty happy, but actually is it? And that's one of the questions we're trying to fathom as we try to understand. So I've talked about the philosophy bit, which is the bit in many ways the more difficult bit. But let's just say they have the capacity to suffer, but can we prove any of the other issues in terms of being self-awareness? And that's where we need to look at the modern-day study of dolphins. Dr. Laurie Marino and Dr. Diana Reese out of the US have done a huge range of work here. And what they've been finding is that they say there's three standards: self-awareness, am I? Is this dolphin an individual in itself? Has it got self-recognition? Can it center one's attention on itself? And has it the ability of metacognition, i.e., can it reflect on its own thoughts and think about other things like the future and other creatures' feelings? Well, if we were to examine the dolphin's brain here, this is a bottlenose dolphin, which is one of the most commonly known dolphins I think most people would recognize. What you'd find is a very, very complex brain. And this is the problem also in comparisons. When we do comparisons, we tend to go, compared to a human, this brain is a third of the size. But in terms of encephalation quotient, pardon me, its brain is, humans is about a 7. This is the ratio of the brain size to the rest of the body. With a dolphin, a bottlenose dolphin, it's about 5. So that's 1 to the dolphin and 1 to the human. But again, the problem with that context of that scientific type of study is we always start with the human measurement and then we're comparing. So if you take, say, birds, which many species like parrots appear to have high intelligence, you're talking about quite low sizes of brains to the rest of the size of the body, and so maybe those aren't the best comparisons. Some of the recent work, which is getting really exciting, is study of neurons in the brain. And what they found recently is a series of things called spindle cells. And spindle cells are neurons which appear to be really to do with the emotional cognitive behavior. And we know in humans that if these neurons get affected, then we see it in dementia patients and patients who've lost that ability to relate socially. There's only 3 other groups of creatures that have them. That's the great apes, elephants, and whales and dolphins. So there's something about that group where social ability, the ability potentially to empathize with each other, is crucially important. So, okay, the biology is sort of going, I think, in the direction I want to go. But what about behavior? Well, we can do tests. So dolphins like this can be put through mirror recognition tests. This is where we take a dolphin, we put a sticker on it, we put a mirror in front of it, and we'll see if that dolphin recognizes itself by noting that the sticker is on it. You can do it with a whole range of creatures, and you get varying responses. With human beings, it depends if it's a Saturday morning or whatever. So you get about a 95% success rate. With dolphins, it's closer to 100%. We used to do it with elephants. We thought it never worked with elephants. And what people used to do is take a mirror, bathroom mirror, hold it up to the elephant with a sticker on him, and the elephant just stood there. A couple of years ago, Frans de Waal and his team realized that actually taking a small mirror and holding up to an elephant was a bit stupid. So what they did was they took a life-size elephant mirror and held it up to the elephant, and the elephant immediately went, oh yeah, it's over here. Again, the context. We were trying to use a human methodology and our view of the world, looking through our window to try and understand the elephant. In this case, we needed something different. With dolphins also, there's what's called a paddle test, as the way I describe it, where sounds are broadcast to the dolphins, and they're asked to distinguish between the previous sound and the sound they're just hearing. And if the sound is close, they hit the paddle that says yes. If it's different, they hit the paddle that says no. But what was interesting, they introduced a third paddle, and without a reward structure around it, the third paddle says, I don't know. And the dolphins, where the sound gets down to the level where we think that maybe they won't be able to distinguish either, they hit the don't know sound. This shows something about self-referential behavior in the dolphins, that they are able to distinguish and also answer a question in a different way, showing quite a level of sophistication. I'm not a great fan of captivity, by the way. I think there's some interesting stuff that has come out of it, but as we learn more about these creatures, I don't think they ought to be held in captivity and in tanks. If we look into the wild studies, what we find is some remarkable things. Have any of you seen the orcas on the old David Attenborough films where they come up on the beach and they're hunting sea lions in Patagonia? Well, a study there, which is a long-term study, noted one year that there was an orca whose jaw had broken and couldn't feed. So basically the scientists said, well, okay, that one's gone. We're going to write that one off. It won't be here next year. But they carried on watching. And what they found was other orcas were hunting and then bringing food to feed that orca. Took about a year, but the jaw recovered, and then that orca was just part of that society and carried on. So what was it culturally that led to that to happen? Well, maybe that orca was the son or daughter of one of the lead females, and she wanted her genes to continue. That might be one biological explanation. Maybe It was just one of the group. They empathized, and they wanted him to survive in this case. More recently, we've had the reverse situation where an older dolphin, a film out of Korea, and there was an older dolphin that was ill, and the other dolphins actually formed a raft underneath the dolphin to keep her going and held her at the surface. Now, we've seen this with holding up with cars before, but never holding up other dolphins that actually was most probably past reproduction age, wasn't going to contribute to the community any further in terms of biological terms, but most probably was contributing from a cultural point of view. And this is the thing we've discovered now. Culture in these creatures is actually as important as some of the biological issues that we've been dealing with. I just wanted to show you a couple of very quick ones. This dolphin is called Billy. Billy, about 20 years ago, Billy lives off Adelaide in the Port River there. We have a long-term study. We've been looking at them there. Billy got trapped behind a marina wall and had to be taken into captivity for about 3 weeks, and then she was released. Billy was never made to do any tricks or anything for food while she was in the facility, but a short time afterwards, Billy started doing this. Now, this isn't just Billy jumping out of the water. This is called a tail walk. Billy is actually up and racing backwards. I'm afraid I haven't got video to show you of this, but she's going backwards at a pace. It doesn't help her in feeding. It doesn't help her in attracting a mate. She's very, very successful at doing that. She's had a number of calves, but she just seems to be doing it for fun. And other dolphins in that community have started to learn it. But why would they do that? It's using up energy. It's expending energy they should be using for hunting, we thought. It might be that they're just having fun. And if they can have the capability of having fun, then maybe something else is also going on. The last short story I wanted to tell you very quickly before the end is the story of a dolphin called Kelly. Kelly was in Mississippi, and she was in captivity, and she was taught to by the trainers to clean up the tank at the end of the day. It was quite a cost-effective method. You'd say, go and swim around and pick up all the debris. And what Kelly managed to do was bring debris in. She gets fed a fish as a reward. Kelly was quite smart, though. And what Kelly did was she went out and she found a big piece of paper, brought it back, and she got a reward. She found a small piece of paper, brought it back, and she got a reward. And something happened in Billy's mind. Because the next time, Billy went out and found a big piece of paper. She hid it, and then started ripping small pieces off, and then taking the small pieces back to get a reward. So Billy, in this case Kelly, I think was doing a little bit of game theory. I think she was doing some quite basic mathematics, but pretty good for her. And she was developing that and then teaching it to her other colleagues. I'll close with those examples, but the lesson for me, I think, is to say that we have to make a leap. We can no longer look at whales and dolphins as just big stocks of animals that are out there. We can't talk about it's acceptable to lose 5%. We have 196 bottlenose dolphins off the north coast of the UK. If we were to lose 3 of the females, which are the ones that culturally are passing on information, we actually might lose the whole of that population. So we can no longer talk about small percentages. We have to jump our anthropocentric views, and we have to start thinking about individuals and those subpopulations, the cultural groups that are there. We have to look into the eyes of these creatures and be able to understand what it means. And I think we owe something to future generations. It's not just to hand over to them the number of species that were there when we walked upon the earth, but we have to hand over to them all the applied knowledge and experience we've had. We have to say that conservation has to be tempered by our ever-expanding understanding of the moral empathy for these creatures. It's a huge challenge. It's a massive challenge. But for us as human beings, I think we can rise to it. I think they deserve it, and I think we deserve it, and I think the world will be better for it. Thank you very much.